Hey everyone, this is Thaco Thoughts with Rob. This is session 3, and today's topic is Vancian magic. So, as everybody knows, Vancian magic can be a little controversial in some circles. The idea of having to memorize a spell, the whole fire and forget concept, can be a little bit bothersome to some people, especially with the advent of modern video games, where magic spells become more of a superpower than a magic system. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss the basic history of Vancian magic. As many know, that Gary Gygax based the original magical system for Dungeons and Dragons or AD&D off of the books by Jack Vance, the Dying Earth series. I myself have read a lot of the Dying Earth series, and before I read those books, I myself was a little dubious about the Vancian magic system myself, so no judgment there. But and I highly recommend this, once you read the Dying Earth series, it puts the Vancian system into beautiful context. You see why it's such a great system to reflect, I believe, true fantasy versus superpowered beings, just lobbing off bolts of energy left and right, or other powerful magics without any sacrifice whatsoever. So the idea is that as a magic user, as a wizard, you are intimately tied to your spell book. Without that spell book, you're useless. And to be honest with you, that's how it should be. That is your tool of trade. And magic should be about hard work and sacrifice. So one of the other reasons that I think it makes a lot of sense why the fire and forget method makes a lot of sense on a world-wide level is that it puts high-level magic users in check. Because without them being intimately tied to their spell books, without having to, constantly having to refresh those spells, high-level wizards are pretty much gods. If you allow these high-level characters to just simply call up a spell whenever they want and just fling it out, well, in a real-world context, they're pretty much gods. There's no so-called balance of power. And that would explain why magic users don't rule all worlds. They need to have limitations to a certain extent. But one of the other things that you have to think about is that a wizard doesn't just have memorized spells at their disposal. They have a lot of other tools. They have scrolls, they have magic items, potions, the whole 9 yards. See, I think that's one of the things that people forget is wizards have many tools besides just memorization and what they have access to. Now, if you use the proficiency system, wizards are still useful beyond just their spellcasting ability. They still have many skills that they bring to the table that other character classes just would never bother to actually learn. So the wizard, should always be the big brain of the group. Should always be the one that can bring some unique knowledge to the situation, other than the bard, of course. But let's say that, the Vancian magic system, especially at low levels, is kind of a bummer, right? One of the things that kind of annoys a lot of people is that a first level wizard, unless you're a specialist, you have but one spell you can memorize. Just one. And once you cast that spell, well, then what do you do? personally me, it never really bothered me too much because I always was a wizard that or a magic user that carried around like a sling of some sort. So once I got rid of my spell, and if I didn't have any scrolls or anything like that, I would just use my sling during combat, and that was it. And I was pretty happy with that until I gained more spells, of course. But there are little things you can do to kind of loosen things up for the Vancian magic system, and still have that magical feel, because that's what's the important thing, is having that aesthetic, that feeling that what you are doing is magic and not superpowers. So one of the things that I do is I allow certain spells to be cast in a ritual sense. For example, a lot of the detection spells, I will allow a ritual version of that spell. For example, detect magic. So when a player wants to cast detect magic, especially as a first level character, you don't want that to be the only spell you have available. So when you do want to cast detect magic, it would take about 10 minutes of ritual casting. Not only does it take about 10 minutes of ritual casting, but it also takes 10 gold pieces per level of spell to do a ritual. Of course, 10 gold pieces represents the material components, the ritual gear, and all of that other stuff that you need to cast a spell of that nature. I believe that this maintains that feeling of a wizard casting actual magic, and it also gives the players more options. They don't feel like they have to basically fill up their few slots with spells that, well, let's be honest, a lot of players consider anything that doesn't deal damage directly as almost useless, which I don't agree with that, but that's the idea that a lot of players come across with. So this would allow players to save those precious slots for more utility and combat spells. All right, so here's the deal. Obviously, if you're more comfortable with the idea that your magic user could just lob off spells whenever you want, I mean, that's fine. I mean, it works in a lot of sense. My take on it is more from like I said, aesthetic feeling. How does it feel? So the last thing I'm going to bring up is a power creep factor. If mages or wizards are allowed to just spontaneously cast whatever spell they happen to have in their spell books. I've been in games where the dungeon master did not use the Vancian system. He used a pure spell slot system, and as long as you had the spell in your spell book, you can pretty much cast a spell whenever you wanted. At low levels, this could work fine. But one of the things I was seeing when we were getting up into like 10 plus levels is that players were kind of casting the same spells over and over and over again. In other words, fireball, 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 lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt, with no other consideration for any other type of spell. When I first started out in 89, 90, I saw no issue with sitting down, looking at your spell list, and making decisions about what spells you're going to have access to until the next time you memorize spells. It just didn't bother me at all. Matter of fact, I thought that was kind of part of the fun, is trying to think and figure out ahead of time, what obstacles you would run into, and making sure that you memorize the right spell for the job. So if you don't want to see the kind of video game play style in your Dungeons and Dragons game, especially if you're trying to run a more old school style Dungeons and Dragons game, consider just simply sticking to the Vancian system and just making sure that players have access to a lot of scrolls. Make sure that they have appropriate, level appropriate magical items available to them to help them supplement their memorized spells. With that, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. So this has been episode 3 or session 3 of Thaco Thoughts with Rob. Also look for this episode on both Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course here on YouTube. And this show has been brought to you by the Evil Dungeon Master. All right, guys. Well, until next time, good gaming.